There's something that actually it just hit me. It really was the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, made me think about this. I'd been a bit circumspect in taking this idea of like, well, there are political interests of these people who call themselves queer. That you wouldn't have anybody organize politically unless they had political interests. And so then I had to really think about that, like, because immediately when we think of, say, so you see what an interest group says, then when the interest group in some way acts politically, you then see how that political interest group acts. As time goes on, you kind of see where they end up sort of getting their customers from, who invests in that political interest group and their movement. And then beyond that, you then kind of go back over, and how does that political interest group actually act? So we know what they say, we know what then they did, then who's paying them. Now, let's look again at what they did. And so now with these people going after J.K. Rowling the way they are, and that she preoccupies like the low rent district in their mind, more and more I'm having to sit back and be like, this is really fascinating, because there fundamentally, the 70s is this period of time that's very hard in some ways to kind of get good solid eyes on the ground in a thing about certain political things. But there were certain books that were written where people admitted like their actual political interests. So you got a lot of the sexual revolution, and especially kind of the queer end of the sexual revolution, admitting in a lot of writing that they need to sort of destroy all of the norms of the nuclear family based in, the American culture based around the nuclear family. So one, it's an open admission that the American culture is based around the nuclear family. It is an open admission of that. That is a bred for thing, bred out of Western Europe and Christian sexual norms. And and actually to the point that it's peculiar of Europe. One woman, one man for life. That's peculiar to Europe. We've tried to say it's normal to everyone, but it's not. Like, it was and that's where Robert Briffault's The Mothers is such a great book, being that he was a socialist, that he was pointing out to people, you guys keep trying to make all of these alternative ways of dealing with of procreation, of having children and reproducing. You're trying to make this into the model that you see in Europe, and you won't deal with maybe all of these people have models that are somewhat unique to their own group and are different because they lived vastly different lifestyles. Because it really was that intellectuals in the West were trying to say, like, okay, this is different, but it's still the same as us. And in this really weird way, and to the point that it's even entered Christianity. And that it still is kind of this poison to Western thinking, because it really is like, no, you need to accept the uniqueness of that. Like, right now, liberals will not accept the uniqueness of Islam, in that it does believe in everything we think of as bigotry, sexism, slavery, racism, and violence as a solution to social problems. Those can't be separated from that religion. They absolutely can't, by the fundamental texts of the religion. They cannot be separated. They are not immoral. They are in this weird gray area of morality, while Christianity cannot justify them. If there's any way of eliminating these evils, Christianity has to do it. It's duty bound that, yeah, it's duty bound to eliminate it's the suffering of the slave. And if that requires destroying slavery, that's what it requires. That is not, that doesn't exist. That even that moral concept doesn't exist in Islam. And people want to make it the same thing. They go, no, because they know, no, this Western virtue is unbelievably superior. It's incredibly superior, and it's the basis of what we think of in most ideas of modern politics and pursuing political interests. The idea that you attract others to your political interests. Like, you don't, like, make others do your political interests. Like, in the Western world, the ideal is attract people to your political interests. You want to do things that make them say, wow, we want to include you. Which is usually then something that you'll see in the culture itself. That the culture does things that are then either that are emulative of the larger culture, or the larger culture starts to also come up with emulations of this group. Like Blue-Eyed Soul, or rock and roll itself is actually a fantastic example of how groups in America would emulate each other, because that's actually far more what Americans really are, rather than some kind of group of people who live on divisiveness and racism and all this crapple that liberals like to say. It's because they're devoid of culture and they don't know their rock music. That they won't accept, like, no, in this culture eating sushi is normal. It's not strange. It's not a strange behavior. But you see, there's this thing, the liberal has to be a sophisticated lover of the exotic. So if sushi is normal, and in our society, the lover of the exotic is the liberal, and sushi's normal, sushi no longer, it's been taken. It's been whatever, cultural, what are they, it's been snatched. It's been, there's some term they have for it. Like, the culture took sushi from the Japanese. The white man took the sushi. There we go, conservative. That's somewhere. There is a great line. He even took sushi from the Japanese. The what, man? He even took away sushi. He took the pyramids, and then he took sushi from the Japanese. So, with gays and the queers, quote unquote, this queer thing, which used to be a slur, their interests really lie in all groups in power. But you see, for straight women, one of the issues that can't be denied is their power comes from their neoteny. Neoteny is an indication of usually whether they could still reproduce. So their reproductive power for a straight woman is raw power. It's raw power. People want to watch a young OnlyFans girl. They don't want to watch an old OnlyFans female. They want them young. They want them young. And so doing that which makes young women lose their fertility, almost anything that despoils fertility, despoils virginity and virtue, female virtue, of like patience and looking for a good mate and things like that. Anything to mess that up is in their interest. Anything that can basically keep males single and paying into the tax system is in their interests. Because men and women, once they start having families, they will try to take money from the government. They'll try to withhold taxes through legislation. They'll say, I don't want taxes. I don't want you having my money. I want to have my husband's money, because we have kids to feed. Things like community centers, all this stuff that would entertain people who don't have families, is in their interest. I had to really start thinking of this, like how everything, I'm like, what kind of hurts my feelings? Because a lot of this is, I'm thinking about San Francisco. I'm like thinking, how was San Francisco, like, what did I perceive? You know, they would want lots of luxuriating and parks and these, like, kind of amenities, like these areas of great amenities, but not necessarily with, rather than functional industrial cities of any sort, real commerce, things like that. It's sort of like these paradisical playground cities, these paradise zones, to constantly be on vacation in a way. Market economics seems to bother queers. It's like so I wanted to also bring up Out magazine, where they used to out gay people who wanted to keep their business to themselves. So it was that there's this bunch of people, and there's a lot of them, like a very, very large portion of homosexuals want homosexuality to be this very political thing that you're not allowed to keep quiet about, that you're not allowed to have a private life about. I think that there's a lot of people that the reason why they are even the way they are in their public life is because at some point finally somebody kind of made it clear, like, that they need to come out, or somebody will just out them anyway. But that once I started to see that more, I started to see how this started to become this incredibly normal thing, and now how everything being queer is like that's like the great problem solver, because it makes, like, men into women. You know, men won't be hostile and mean and start war anymore because they'll all be gay. And everything will be better because the women will all be lesbians, so they won't have kids and they'll work like slaves, and they'll all be kind of, aggressive and a little autistic, and unattractive and heavy. And they'll die earlier because of their heaviness and lifestyle issues. I mean, there seems to be some fascinating sets of interests that I'm like, as I just roll through this in my mind, So you have this portion of the community that they're like, I wouldn't bother anybody with my issues, my lifestyle, this is mine, not a whole bunch of other people's. And then there's this huge portion of the population of homosexuals who are not just like, everybody needs to know about this at all times, but in fact, they need, and for some reason, to speak to children about it. Now, they know there's nothing that justifies this. This is really something that I've actually had to really, kind of walk through in my mind. And I was really thinking about it, and I'm like, no. What this is finally the stage at which this is a political interest group that only garners negative attention. It's a dare to society. Do something about us. And it comes, this is a Buddhist thing that I've noticed. I know the Buddhists are the ones who made me see it. It turns out the Orthodox Christians also have a thing about this. So with the Buddhists have this thing that they're like, so people will do things because they want to destroy, and they can't control the compulsion to destroy things, and it's, so they'll even destroy themselves. So like a lot of exercises, spiritual exercises that were like in the extremis, were exercises that were, he was like, no, because this could destroy you. And that it's really based around some kind of compulsion or desire along those lines. And the idea that you sort of need to endure a more subtle type of staying awake and aware, a type of level of awareness that was the Buddhist meditative practice, which is also at the same point the kind of the state that you are in, or somebody is in, because they are in practice at all times, because their mind is what it's about. And so with the Orthodox would bring it up as the void, that there's a desire to the desire to yield to the void and to fall into it, and to not to be to shy away from one's natural magnanimity and fall into the void. That was so the Orthodox put it in this way. So when people desire destruction, it is that they're just slipping into the void. So I was, and so a big part of this whole grooming children stuff that's going on. These are people that they are daring the void. They're like, I've tasted the void, I've teased the void, I've kind of been to the void and back. Children are resilient. That's that kind of school of thinking. But it is the desire for destruction. And it's now a very prevalent part of our society, that we have people who love the void and they want destruction. They can't create things. They don't have the capacity anymore. They don't have the passion for it. In many cases, they don't have the fundamental way of conceiving of things, like orderly processes of thought, ways of constructing an image in their mind. It's easier to destroy what has been established. And then also, one would say, well, okay, if they think they can just destroy things, where do they get this right to destroy things from? And it's like, okay, well, no, this is their inheritance. They've inherited an empire. And they've inherited the empire, and they've judged the empire not to be up to their standards. They get to destroy it. I was thinking about all this kind of stuff for a while, and it's just kind of coming together in a series of thoughts over coffee. BLM is a gay group that hates black people. It's actually an anti-black hate group. That's why they mock the dead and dance around and twerk and destroy things. And then beyond that once they do that, then all sorts of destruction follows when they end up coming to town. And so you end up having these destroyers mocking the dead, invoking the dead's name, twerking all over the place, destroying things. Wow, that guy was super methed out who just passed by me. Freaked out on the meth, on the goofballs. Gonked out on the goofers. But so that's just some thoughts I was having. My hand's getting a little cold and I've gotten to my destination. So I'll just have to think about some of that stuff. All right, later.